quite a bit thus far in this leadership course. You have learned that leadership is a complicated and dynamic process to affect positive influence in the world, right? Create positive change. And so I want to just quickly, before we move on, circle back to where we have covered thus far. So if you look at your table of contents in your textbook, we've covered chapters 1 through 6. And chapters 1 through 6, understanding leadership, traits, strengths, philosophy and styles, tasks and relationships, and leadership skills, all basically cover your understanding of what you need to develop within oneself to be able to earn the respect to create that influence with other people and organizations, right? And so as we move into the next chapters of this course, I want you to understand that what we're now going to be doing is taking what we have learned about growing and activating ourselves as leaders and using our strengths, right, in order to move forward and to put that into practice, right? Put that into practice into the world. And so I want to remind you of those important graphics in this course, right? That we must understand that leadership begins with ourselves, that we are in the center of all of this. We can only be as good a leader as we are as good a person. And so we must begin there, because once we're doing the work on ourselves, we're able to better connect with one other person, an individual, or others, right? And then we're better to connect with the group and to feel what the group needs, right? And be able to offer that as a leader. And then once we're able to create influence and change within individuals, groups, and organizations, we're able to affect change within communities and even the world, right? So this is important as we're moving forward, that you understand that we must continue to keep the focus on developing ourselves, right? Getting good at being our best we can be, to learn to walk through the world with that lens of where can I make a difference? Where can I stand up? Where can I do things that other people are not willing to do, to show up in leadership, not as a title or a position of authority, but as activating myself as a leader. That work needs to be ongoing as we move through how to then put this work into practice. So this week, I say that because this week we are covering in chapter 7, creating a vision. So leaders are continually working on themselves, right, to get them to a place where they can earn the respect of others and earn the right to influence others, right? Because people recognize real. Real recognizes real. One of the best examples I can give of this is if we all can think back to middle school, when you had a substitute teacher walk in, all of us within a few seconds could very quickly assess whether we could take advantage of that middle school substitute teacher or whether we knew that that substitute was able to control the room, right? We could read this from their body language. Were they able to maintain eye contact? How loud was their voice? This is a great analogy to what leadership has to act like and look like, right? We have to be able to walk the walk, not just talk the talk, because people understand authenticity and react well to authenticity, right? So if you really believe that you can earn the respect of the group in a positive and motivating way, if you have done the work on yourself, then you will begin to get the respect of others and earn their influence, okay? Now, one of the things that is most necessary in this process of leading others is creating a vision of what the future could be that is better than what it is now, right? Right now, the status quo is what it is. And if you're a true leader, whether it's a leader in industry, like business, right? Like Steve Jobs did with the, with the iPhone, he envisioned something different and something better, but he had to articulate that vision in a way that allowed people to get on board, right? The people that he worked with the technology, because he did not know how to create that technology, but also the society, that us as consumers, were we ready to buy into this thing, right? And so all of those things have to be articulated in a way that get people on board and will make real and lasting change. Now, I gave you a business example, but we can see this in all sorts of other places, right? We see this politically, where people, kind of can buy into a vision that a politician can give them of a better future, right? And then hopefully they walk the walk and talk the talk. And what they do is try to get the society to move towards that direction. So why does vision matter in leadership? Vision creates purpose, and it gives people something to believe in. And that matters a lot. Human beings, we need meaning in our lives, right? And so purpose matters a lot. A leader has to create that vision, and a leader has to implement that vision, right? One way that we do this is through really solidifying what our vision is. Last week, you guys created a leadership philosophy. One of the things that you'll be asked to do this week is to create a vision mission statement. It's a really short one sentence that asks you to pull together some things you know about yourselves and what you believe about the future to create kind of a goal setting statement for yourself as to what you believe the vision of the future should be. So let's start this lecture by a quote from Jonathan Swift, a very famous English writer. Vision is the art of seeing the invisible. Leaders have to be able to envision a future that the rest of us cannot really fathom, right? You have to see things that are not quite there yet and help the rest of us create a plan and get on board with that vision, okay? So this matters because folks and human beings need a mental model of an ideal future state, right? A guiding philosophy, a way to develop meaning in their own lives and to believe in order to get there, okay? All right, so how do we break through people's resistance to change? Because we all know that that exists, right? All of us can see that we have resistance to change in our own lives, and this is true in humanity in general. Well, leaders have a vision, and they must articulate that vision in a way that, number one, is big enough change that people can go, wow, I can get really passionate about that kind of future for myself, right? But also change that's not so diametrically different to what they know right now that they are too reluctant to get on board. This is a tricky thing, right? Leaders have to be able to create change that's big enough for people to get excited about it, but not so big that they become afraid. Okay, this is a tricky thing to walk, but this, if you think about it, is exactly what leadership is, right? It's about being able to show up in the moments and know when it's time to take charge, when it's time to back up, right? Know when it's time to lean into relationship and when it's time to lean into task, to know when it's time to be the authority and when it's time to be laissez-faire or democratic, right? Leaders have to be adaptable. Well, vision is a place where you also have to create a vision where people can find meaning and get excited and passionate about it, but also create a change that's big enough to get us to that passion, but not so scary that it will scare us away from doing it, okay? So the purpose of the vision should be unifying, right? It should be motivating. It should be getting us, some forward motion into a better space. Often when we think of vision, I want you to think of this statement, and that is leaders have to begin with the end in mind. We must show our followers, right, the people, our associates, whatever it is that you're doing, that the end result, if we follow this strategy that I've created, will be more beautiful and will be more productive and will be more lucrative if we're talking business, right, than we are right now. You have to ask your followers to have faith. And in order for people to have faith in your vision, you must be an embodiment of that vision, right? And so that's where that work on ourselves comes in, right? If we're asking people to sacrifice, we must be doing the sacrificing first and being consistent about that. As I mentioned previously, change is difficult for anybody, but it's especially difficult for groups or organizations or communities. And so leaders have to really understand that, have to value that, and have to really try to get inside of it and articulate to people in a way that they are willing to make those changes. Okay, resistance is normal. It's common. You must address the value systems and the norms that people are currently living with in order to change those value systems and norms. You must be able to articulate why it needs to change. And you have to basically appeal to people's greater good, right? Like, this is what I see and this is what can be. Do you see it with me? Because this will create meaning and purpose for you and will be better for all of us as a whole. Again, this is adaptable to whether we're talking about nonprofit organizations or creating a family between you and your partner, right? Having a vision of what you see for your family, or if we're talking about leadership in a business organization. All of these things remain true because leadership is adaptable everywhere. When you implement that vision and putting that vision into practice, articulation matters. And you guys know this, right? Someone tries to explain something to you and they don't do a good job at it, you are not going to understand what they have to say, comprehend what they have to say, and you're definitely not going to buy into what they have to say. So leaders have to be able to read the audience, right? Sometimes you're talking to one person and that person could be a 12-year-old child. Sometimes you're talking to a group of people who are executives at a TED conference. You have to be able to articulate to your audience, right? You must be adaptable and flexible. That word comes up again, right? So you must, as a prerequisite, be able to articulate your vision appropriately to that audience to motivate them to see the meaning and the purpose behind your vision in order to get on board and to make those changes that can be scary to their norms and value systems, right? Okay. Getting strategic. So once you get people to buy into your vision, you have to be able to create a strategy. And you can do this not just on your own, but if you've built the right team, right? The team that has a balance to your strengths. So if I have strengths in relationships and interpersonal relationships and emotional intelligence, I'm going to want to build some people in my team that are good administrative folks and good conceptual folks, right? And together we're going to come up with a really good explicit, meaning very particular and detailed way to get to our future state, to that vision that we're talking about, so that people can understand where the goalposts are and how do we get there? How do we make that happen, right? Because it's one thing to say, like, let's use a real world example. I want to lose 20 pounds, but that's a wish until we actually get real specific about how we're going to get there and keeping it time bound and keeping it measurable. Leaders have a responsibility to create a strategic way of implementing that vision, of getting there, right? And creating short-term goals that let us feel some satisfaction on the way. So all of that matters through positivity and motivation as well. All right, that's pretty much that chapter, okay? So chapter 7, when we talk about vision, those are the things that you need to keep in mind. That number 1, it begins with you. Number 2, that you're going to need to address the status quo, what is right now, and then creating and allowing people to see a better vision for the future. We do this through acknowledging that we need to articulate that in a way that people will understand and begin to feel passionate about it by finding meaning in it. Understanding that change is difficult and you will inevitably have resistance when you have change. So understanding that the change needs to be big enough to excite people, but not so big that it's scary. You need to be able to come up with a strategy for getting people there, right? Specific, explicit ways with which we can create that vision and actually make